Alrighty. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We have an awesome panel of architects who are ready to dig in. So let me introduce 10K Advisors CEO Nick Ham.
All right, thank you very much, Molly. Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Ham. I'm the founder and CEO of 10K Advisors, and I thank you all for joining us today on our Ask the Expert series. Why do you need an architect? So just a brief intro on who 10K is. So 10K is a Salesforce consulting shop. We focus on working with the emerging and rapidly growing community of small independent consultancies and independent consultants, and we connect them with the customers who need their help on demand. Included in that network are obviously lots of architects, which is why we're talking about this today. So we have, I think, 3 different countries and 5 different time zones represented here on this panel, which is pretty awesome. I started with my intro. I've been in the ecosystem about 14 years, and like I said, founder and CEO of 10K. Have worked with a number of architects in my time, and 3 of the best ones I've ever worked with are on this call right now. So I'd like to start by introducing Joshua Hoskins and let him do a kind of brief background on himself.
Everyone, I've been in the ecosystem for about the same time as Nick, 14, 15 years, but who's counting? Just as long as S controls were introduced, that makes me really, really old in the ecosystem. My claim to fame is really living internationally and being a digital nomad. So I focus on living internationally. I'm based in India right now, where I'm basically the conduit between remote teams. So I manage a lot of the collaboration that happens over border lines, basically, whether it be remote development, strategic product development, but really we'll talk a little bit about this today, is a delivery architect, which is a mix of solutioning, a mix of technical and just people management as a whole. So thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. Next, let's kick it over to Mr. Lamb.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Nick. My name is Matt Lamb. I'm the CTO and Chief Architect at 10K Advisors. I've equally been in the ecosystem for about 13 or 14 years. I've done everything. I started as an admin, done everything that I can imagine under the sun in terms of Salesforce roles. And these days I focus on all of 10K's technology platform, both internal and external. And I've, my whole career on Salesforce has really been about helping companies get the most out of Salesforce and really help anybody using Salesforce take advantage of what it does to move their business ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And last but not least, the inimitable Mike Gill. Who's on mute? I mean, we can read your bio, but it's a lot better if we can hear you say it.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute. Sorry. Hello everyone. So this is me, the fellow Brit on the panel. Based out here in the UK. But how long have I been in the ecosystem? Probably about the same as most of these guys. Over 10 years now. I guess I've been, in most roles. I've worked my way up through a variety of different roles. Now into an architect role. Working for a range of companies, big, and small, and different consultancies, and picked up a lot of battle scars, learned a lot, worked with some great people, and happy to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, gentlemen. Well, thank you very much again for taking the time this morning and for being here to share your knowledge and experience with everyone. So we'll dive right in. We got kind of a short webinar today, so we'll keep it efficient and hopefully keep the topic useful for everyone. So all of you mentioned, you've been in the ecosystem for a while now, and I know that as the ecosystem's grown, we've seen a lot more architects emerge in the ecosystem of all varieties. As Joshua mentioned, we have people who call themselves Salesforce architects, technical architects, solution architects, delivery architects, program architects, right? There's marketing architects, business architects, lots of different architects out there. If I was Steve Ballmer, it'd be architects, right? So what I'm curious to hear from your opinions, guys, is, kind of a couple things. One, Was there a certain point in your career where you're like, now I'm an architect, and kind of what was the culmination of that? And then also, of the architects that you've worked with, and maybe people who are mentors to you, or things that you try to exude to your mentees, what are kind of the top three things that really great architects do, or what are some of the great attributes of architects? So I'll maybe start with the order we did intros. Joshua, if you want to give your opinion first, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So when I think about an architect, I really think about someone who has experience, someone who has been able to experience the need to be proactive in a certain situation. You've got to be able to be on projects and come across challenges that you're going to overcome to be able to call yourself an architect. I think back when I was at a consulting partner, you were an architect when it was in your title, and I had to work for that. Many battle scars in delivery and in pre-sales to finally understand what that really meant. And I think that throughout the roles that I've played to get to architect, the two most important things were making sure that you were building a house, right? So if you build a house, you want it to be sturdy, you want it to be run efficiently, and you want it to be successful. You don't want any damage and things like that. So that was very important. The other thing is really listening to what's being said, but also to what's not being said. A lot of the times when solutions or challenges are described to you, or you're in a meeting, an architect has to know how to read a room and really listen to everyone's concern to really make sure that you address what the business need is, as well as the technical solution.
Awesome. Love the listening one. What do you think?
Yeah, agreed on all that. I especially agree on the need for experience, right? When I became an architect, it was similar with Josh. Sort of, I was a senior consultant at a firm, and I went to my boss and said, "This is where I want to go. I want to be an architect." And she said, "Great, we'll assign you as an architect on a project next." And I quickly realized I was pretty far and over my head. And I reached out to several folks in the organization and got embedded with them alongside them on projects. And that's where I really learned the bulk of what I know today is sitting alongside folks who have done it before. And I think that's a tremendously important thing for anybody who wants to be an architect, and a practical way to get that deep experience is working with somebody. The ability to be mentored, right, I think is a critical skill for an architect, because it's not about having all the answers. It's about taking the inputs that you have from the business and the technical side, like Josh said, weighing that against all the things you know from your past projects, and being able to identify the things you don't know, right? And being able to tell the customer, like, hey, I'm not sure about this, right? Being humble enough to not have all the answers, I think is a critical skill in that, because you're the senior technical advisor on the project. And if you can't really fake your way through that, right?
Yeah.
Love it. Mike Gill, what would you add?
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of, you mentioned the word critical there, feeds nicely into, critical thinking and, how to think critically about things. It's stuff that I'm teaching my kids. It's almost the same stuff that I'm doing every day. You're assessing technology, you're comparing different technologies, looking at the pros and cons, and then you're kind of thinking about, okay, how does this relate to the problem that you need to solve for the customer? And then presenting that in a way that's consistent and clear and gets them going. That's critical thinking. And then the other thing that I think is a paramount skill to an architect is being business savvy, right? You can't just talk all tech. If you can't explain it to the business side and present the value that it adds, then it's probably going to be difficult to implement. So, being business savvy is definitely a core skill.
Love it. Okay, so maybe I'll go on to the next one, kind of go in reverse order and start with you again, Mike. So, when should customers think about using an architect in their program? Is this something that, they should always be having an architect involved in everything they do with Salesforce, or are there really kind of more well-suited situations where they, find themselves in a certain situation, they should think, oh, I got to use an architect right now? Or are there other ones where they're like, hey, I don't need an architect for this. This is, maybe something that is not well suited to bring someone like yourself in?
Well, it's always good to have, an architect if you can. I mean, obviously budget and architects, there's this perception that they cost a lot, but the types of things that architects can do is they can bring that core intelligence to a project around validating the technology that you want to do, which typically happens early on in a project. Okay, we've got this problem that we want to solve and we're not sure what technology we need. So, validating it, bringing an architect on early can help with that process. Maybe that's a POC, maybe that's, an MVP, that type of stuff. Then there's obviously, as you move through a project, they can have a good value add and a good role to play on the delivery side. So mentoring the developers, guiding, ensuring that, the project stays on the right track, that things don't kind of creep their way in, because that's one of the battles. Things change, technology changes so fast, and you've got to kind of balance it around and have a control around the technology that's being rolled out and oversee that. It's very important.
Yeah,
the right answer for when is early, right? If you have to pick, if you don't have the budget to have an architect engaged on every one of your projects, right, long term, pull them in the beginning to help with the design process. Same as you're building a house, right? Don't call the architect when the walls are going up, right? We're most valuable, I think, in the beginning when you're helping lay out the plans, right? And being able to call out the risk areas in those plans, help with trade-offs and design decisions about integration architecture or data migration strategy or those kinds of things, right? Where if you don't make the right decision in the beginning, or you don't understand the ramifications of the decision you are making, it's going to hurt you on the back end. It might blow out your budget or your timeline eventually. So being able to front load that expertise and make that part of your plan is, I think, where the most bang for your buck is.
And then, what do you think, Joshua? There's situations where, maybe people thought they didn't need an architect and then brought one in, and maybe I'll kind of pivot a little bit. And what's the danger of not bringing an architect in early?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Matt alluded to it, and, Mike also said that it could be, very expensive. My argument there is it could be way more expensive to fix something on multiple levels. Some things that you might not ever get back. You might not ever get the business confidence back if you ruin that relationship. It could cost you a significant amount more to be able to deliver or make it successful. It could cost you, people or team members as well. So I think it all has a cost, and it's all about weighing those. But like everyone else on this call said, early is better. And I think you also don't need to have an architect on the whole entire time. Having access to one is the key point. So you may just need to, have someone on speed dial, or maybe, allocate a couple of hours, or a bucket of hours from a company, and then be able to leverage those hours as needed. The point is having access to one, not necessarily having someone on a project billing where, they're not needed just to be billing.
Yeah, like an advisor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So I'll maybe stay with you here, Joshua. And you had brought up the kind of concept of a delivery architect, and we talked earlier. There's just all kinds of different flavors of architects out there, and I think it's really been a nebulous term as far as not really having definition until, at least in the Salesforce ecosystem, until Salesforce came out with the actual technical architect certification. So there is an actual certification for a specific type of architect, but we know that's not the only type of architect out there. I think a lot of people kind of maybe navigate to what they enjoy doing the most, right? Maybe some enjoy the very technical aspects, some enjoy maybe setting up more programs, some enjoy managing teams, some enjoy just solutioning and parachuting in and then leaving. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what you enjoy the most, and kind of how you've directed your architect career based on your interests and your things that you're strong at?
Yeah, what I've seen a lot of people say around architecture or being an architect is the capability of building something. So it really comes in a specialty, and you can be an architect as a specialty, or you can be a broader architect. But just as you are a technical architect responsible for the technical solution, or you are a solution architect, which most SIs and system integrators are like the pre-sales architect that happens pre-sales. That's what they're calling solution architects these days. I tend to want to take responsibility for the technical bit as well as the structure of the project for success. And what that means is making sure you have the right teams and processes in place, similar to a program architect as well. One thing I always say is that no two teams will deliver the project the same way. And so it's really about understanding each member of the team or teams that you have and being able to understand their strengths, their weaknesses, how they work, not only from an execution standpoint, but soft skills and culture and how people understand information, because everyone wants to be successful. But what I've come to realize, especially working internationally, is that there are a lot of cultural differences that you have to learn. You can't just like lob things over the fence and expect it to work. And a lot of times it's iteration. So I spend the best part of my time really making sure that when you start, you have the correct team members. There is a communication strategy in place. Folks understand when they're done and when they leave off, and what their responsibilities are. And that's just so critical to the project, because people are people. And I think a lot of times when people are looking at projects, it's about more of a puzzle piece, and I need this role. But you probably need that role and that person to do a specific thing, and they are a person too. So you really have to be able to make sure you have the right players, and you're able to compensate for other people's weaknesses to build a successful project team.
Love that. What do you think, man, as far as, kind of the different, where your architect career has led you? Where would you say, you've kind of directed your path? Not on mute, please.
I've directed my path sort of in two parallel directions. So I started my career doing usability consulting and like user experience research. And so that's a very heavy bend toward thinking about the front end experience of how end users experience a product. In a Salesforce term, right? How does my sales user actually use Sales Cloud? Not how does the integration work that feeds the ERP data in, but what do my sales users actually experience? I did that for a while, and then I shifted over and did the other side, right? Actually, how does the ERP feed the data in? So for me, I try to think very broadly about both, right? I don't think you can silo yourself and just be only thinking about the technical all the time, right? Or only thinking about the business all the time. I think a really effective architect is there as a strategy resource to help whoever you're working with make a plan, a comprehensive plan about how the project or the engagement or whatever it is will be successful. And you don't get to success by isolating and doing one core discipline, right? Architects, in my mind, are yes, they're deep in certain areas, but they're also very broad. They've got a lot of exposure to not only different technologies, but different business structures, different organizations within the business. They might have, they know how a call center operates. They know what a partner program looks like. They've had all this exposure to these different parts of how organizations work, and that's what really helps that person become that strategy resource, right? When they start hearing those inputs, they go, "Oh yeah, I've done this a few times before. I remember some caveats from working with that partner team the last time."
Very nice. Mike Gill, what about you? Your path that you've taken, how did you get here, and kind of where would you say you like to focus as an architect?
So, okay, let's think about this. So, yeah, I guess I transitioned, I've always been a consultant, 20 years now, but yeah, I guess midway through my Salesforce career, 5-6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I was on a big project, possibly the largest project outside of the United States at the time in the UK. It had loads of different architects, but I wasn't an architect. I was a lead consultant, technical lead. But that was really where I kind of learned to think like an architect or start to think like an architect. Okay, so I was managing one particular part of that project as a tech lead, so a bunch of developers, lots of developers, but I was feeding into the architects that was feeding into the bigger architects. But kind of that's, that exposure into that pyramid kind of gave me, the confidence and the knowledge of just hanging with those guys and being on a truly massive project. And then from there, it was a nice stepping stone into an architect role, not of the same size, but you're now, okay, so you've been on a big project, you're now on a smaller engagement where we need an architect, we don't need a team of architects. And that's how I crafted my opportunity. In terms of my career as an architect, I kind of tried to direct myself, I guess if I lean towards anything, is integration. But the good thing about integration is it spans every type of business process anyway, just by the nature of integration, whether it's call centers or loan origination, it doesn't really matter. I think I kind of gone that direction, probably because my background is not software engineering, hard code developing, but I understand the frameworks, the different technologies and that stuff. And with integration, coding is involved when you're consuming APIs, but it's not writing tens of millions of lines of code. It's writing functions to do things, to integrate systems. And that's where I've kind of directed myself.
Love it. Perfect segue into the next thing I was going to ask. So a few of you have mentioned the importance of just experience, right? Exposure to different scenarios, maybe exposure to different teams, exposure to other architects, and also the kind of business savvy part of it, right? Understanding what a call center is, understanding what a sales organization is, what's important to them, how those processes work, and how important that is. One of the things that I would ask you all is, and I think this is a point of contention between maybe some in the ecosystem, to be a successful architect, do you need to be a developer? Anybody take it? Who wants it?
You can go
yes. Next question. No. I think the nuanced answer is it certainly helps, right? So go back to the premise that an architect is the technical responsibility, right? The buck stops with you technically, right? If you're the TA on the project, you should be able to help your developers with problems. You should be able to make sure that the code they're writing is performant, is going to scale up as it needs to, complies with Salesforce's best practices. You're going to be the one where if there's a performance problem in production, when you get all the data loaded, you're going to be the one to figure out how to fix it, right? So if you've not spent any time in Apex or any sort of coding language, I think you're going to struggle in those kinds of engagements where problems happen, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I'll ask the question a different way. Can you be a successful architect without having been a developer? Joshua, what do you think?
It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, let's just call a spade, right? It will create delay when you are in production, as Matt said. It's really hard. I think all of us on this call have actually written code in the past, and we understand object-oriented languages. And even as TAs working with developers, as Matt mentioned, you're responsible for the code, especially with Mike having a bunch of developers. So being able to mentor them and understand how the code needs to be written, because a lot of being a TA is also being able to detect when something is not executed appropriately. Like, if we're running into this issue, this means this didn't happen. So how do I fix my process? How do I fix the code? Do I need to do any damage control? What stakeholders, all that thought and thinking goes into making sure that you're doing your steps. And like Matt and Mike both mentioned, if you've never been in that position before, it's going to be really hard for you to recover and really take accountability for that. And it's going to hit you hard personally, because you could have done better, but you didn't know. And those are some of the battle scars that you have to get working up to an architect.
I
But you have
think it
to
is interesting. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, you have to own your learning as part of that journey. You know, I did, we mentioned object oriented programming. You know, I did that at uni and then never did that at all, probably until that project that I mentioned. You know, I'd never even seen, you know, as much code on that project as I saw on that project. But, you know, that couldn't have been built without a structure. But, you know, you can't read a book and learn that. You know, it's the way you learn that is you see the architects describe why they set the classes the way they did. You know, this is how you do it, and then managing a team to actually follow those patterns is the only way to learn.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be interesting to think about it too in the lens you talked about, Nick, where there's different kinds of architects, right? Different titles of architects. If you're a solution architect and you're doing pre-sales work and you're there to help the customer put a high-level implementation strategy in place, probably don't need to code, right? You are not likely to get into any sort of performance problems or anything like that. If you're an enterprise architect at a big company, right, you're probably pretty far away from the code. I think what we're talking about is you are a technical architect that's embedded on a delivery team doing delivery work. That is going to lean more toward relying or needing that skill of at least having exposure to the concepts behind object-oriented programming.
Love it.
I get your point. I get your point, Matt. I just want to mention one more thing as well and get your thoughts on this as well. I mean, we've all been in the situation where we've had to deliver a project that a pre-sales solution architect has sold, right? You know, and sometimes those deals can be seriously under scoped because they don't have that technical knowledge about, hey, because of this, the project's going to take 3 weeks longer, or you need to have this additional resource. And so selling that high level vision before without having a little bit of technical knowledge could also be very disruptive to the project as well. And I think that's really the core is like, if you don't know, you can't plan, but the people who have the experience, even in the pre-sales engagements, will be able to make sure the timeline is accurate. Otherwise, you'll have blood on your hands when you get into delivery, which is also not a good look.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well.
For sure.
So I'm going to kind of put you guys on the spot here a little bit. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot is, again, you need experience. And Joshua, you keep using the term battle scars, right? So I'd love to hear from each of you, maybe some of the seminal moments and some of those battle scars that you still look down and you can see that you've had on your journey to becoming an architect.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. Go for it. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I was on this project that started off as MVP and just kind of went out of control. I won't mention any names, but it was like MVP, keep things minimal. Let's move quickly, get it out very quickly. And, every month we were expanding more scope. It got crazy, but it was hard to control that and reduce the scope in order to get somewhere, get from A to B. I mean, that's Sorry.
I have a couple times in my life inherited, not designing myself, but inherited a situation where the account table in Salesforce had been integrated with an ERP system directly. And so ERPs are typically based around billing locations, right? And so if Acme Bricks gets a bill in the UK and in Boston and in San Francisco, that's 3 different entities in the ERP. And so if that's integrated back to Salesforce with 3 different entities for Acme Bricks, it starts to cause havoc for sales folks, right? Because you don't know where to put contacts, you don't know where to put opportunities, everything becomes a mess. And I have been a part of a couple of those, and those are extremely painful. That's a good example of a Salesforce architect was not involved in that decision to do that, because you would have spotted that in the beginning to know accounts. I mean, in a B2B world, accounts need to be business entities in Salesforce. Because that's where you go to look at the health of the customer, right? It's one lens to the customer and your relationship to the customer. That's a big one, and that hurts, and has hurt every time I've come across it.
Yeah, you can break Salesforce, you can break your org, you can seriously dead end. Don't think that you can't.
It's re-implementation city. in a lot of cases with that one.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Amen.
Exactly. The point that I would add on that is just really being able to understand perception. And most of the teams that I work with, it really is a lot of assumptions and a lot of perception about what the other person or team is thinking, uh, versus like what really they're thinking. I mean, people don't intentionally do wrong. Teams don't intentionally leave scope out if they understand the business problem. So in the situations that I've come across, my battle wounds are misunderstandings, especially when working with international teams, and being able to foster that communication, as you would do with any projects. I mean, in the last consulting firm that I worked with, was dubbed like the red project child, and I spent a lot of my time helping other projects teams being able to understand kind of where they went wrong, but also managing upwards to the exec chain and saying, okay, cool, here's what happened, here's the pain points, here's what needs to happen, and we need to do this within the parameters. And being able to like dive in and be able to assess all of that and just rebuild a new relationship with the business, is what I believe makes that battle scar a little better, a little more palatable, because you definitely can come out, mentoring the development team, mentoring maybe even some of the senior program managers that were part of getting the situation to that project, right? So a lot of folks, in absence of information, can run projects into the ground, basically. And then you got to be able to come in there and rebuild relationships and mentor people and coach people, not tell them this is what you did wrong and, now I'm going to fix it, stand back. It's really, teaching people how to fish and making sure that people learn from their experiences.
I've got one more to add from it's not all technical standpoint, right? The soft skills matter. It was on a Sales Cloud engagement where we were implementing a number of integrations, and the company wanted to use a tool that they had built in-house to do this. And the other architect and I on the project had evaluated the tool and had a number of major concerns about the way it was going to scale out and handle the data load that we were talking about. So we, multiple rounds of conversation with the technical team that built the product to understand what it does, to talk to them about the trade-offs, and ultimately having to escalate to the CIO to tell her that we didn't think this was a good choice. Even though there's political clout behind this thing internally, it's not going to be the right scalable solution for you to put in place, and you're going to have to pull it out at some future date and put something else in. So, being able to use your technical spidey sense, but then have to apply that technical knowledge to the C-suite or a business owner to be able to help them make the right decision, is something that you run into quite a bit.
That's an interesting thing, Matt, that you just mentioned. Is another perfect attribute to an architect, is being able to talk at all levels, with all levels in the chain. So C-suite all the way down to individual contributor, and being able to understand the needs of that person and what they want to hear. A lot of times people at the top, you get too technical, you'll lose them, they'll lose interest in the project, and they'll get a bad perception of what's going on. So that's something that's really important as an architect, is to be able to make sure that you have the right vernacular for the right stakeholder.
Totally agree with that one. You almost have to be able to sell as well as be technical as well, right? Especially when you start getting into the higher levels of management. They don't really care about the technical details, right? They just care about the solution and what matters to them. So very good point. So I've gotten through most of our questions. We're at about 30 minutes. We have a few questions from the audience. And I do want to encourage anybody who's on, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to address those here in the next few minutes. But one of them that I saw that I thought was pretty interesting is, do you only need an architect for a project? I mean, you all are, everything, right? You're very senior. You know all the technical ins and outs. You know how to code. You know how to deliver. You know how the solution should be built. Should I just go find a bunch of architects to deliver my project, or what?
That would be a pretty pricey project, for one.
Be pricey, and just because a couple points. I don't think you want me writing the core code for your project, right? It's not my core competency right today. right? Micro competency is making diagrams and advising people on things. So one, it's not what I do day to day, and so you probably don't want me doing that because I'm not going to be as efficient as a developer who does this day in and day out. Two, architects are often staffed fractionally across a number of engagements because it's typically strategy, and it's not necessary to have 40 hours of architect. A lot of architects don't want to do full-time development and delivery work, right? I really enjoy the fractional strategy aspect of that, where you're helping a number of clients at any given time who need that high-level guidance and advice. So for me, I wouldn't be interested in that, but it's going to depend on the architect.
Yeah. But it's a good stepping stone. If you're a consultant or a technical lead, you kind of want to move towards that, so it's good to kind of be in the trenches, but then slowly get out of the trenches and become more of this kind of holistic, thinker that's, works top down rather than in the trenches, setting the strategy. Yeah.
And Joshua, somebody who's a delivery architect, what would you say as far as, what do you typically want to surround yourself with as far as skill sets and team members, et cetera?
I think there's something for everyone, right? If you're going to have an architect, you want to be able to make sure you're leveraging all talents in the best way possible, and also keeping people happy. Like Matt mentioned, it's not fun. I think we should also be talking about the things that you don't use architects for, which is, handling bureaucracy in the organization. That is not a good use of an architect's time. The things that make me happy are, being able to understand an idea at the very beginning in its infancy, and being able to deliver on that. Once I understand the concepts, you just leave me be, and that innovation will happen. Especially if I get behind the idea and it's exciting and it's cutting edge. There will be nothing between me and getting something to you in your hands that is sexy or even more sexy than you imagined it. There's always going to be some bonus features that I'm always going to think about. So that's really what makes me happy, and being an architect, is being able to sort of deliver and solve real problems. There's definitely got to be some ROI. A lot of times, all of us will ask questions to the business when we're in the discovery phases. What is the success criteria of the project? And I feel like so many projects teams, they say, well, it needs to be on time and under budget, right? And that's great. And those are definitely KPIs for a project, but you also need to be looking at quantifiable metrics. And so across the project, once I get those at the beginning of the discovery phase, I actually make sure that in the delivery, we make sure that we can collect the baseline and then also be able to report on it over time so that we understand whether we are successful or not. A lot of times when you're on a longer project, it's hard to do that because there's so many feelings involved. Someone said no to someone and they're not getting their feature, and that's why the project's not successful. So I love managing to objectives and key performance indicators, and making sure that whatever solution that myself or my team is responsible for actually meets the mark, and it meets the mark of the items that we identified at the beginning of the project.
Very good. So I think we got time for one more question, and I'll first ask a question for you guys. Are any of you all certified technical architects, Salesforce certified technical architects?
Nope.
All right,
No,
so
I passed the original written exam long ago, and then I never got my act together and went to the boards.
right. Okay. So then maybe our audience can take your answers to this question with a grain of salt. But how important is a certification when you're looking for a Salesforce technical architect?
If they've got one, that's fantastic because there's not that many, right? But because I think this is true with any certification, right? It shows that you took the time to devote yourself to learning the material that's on that exam, and you sat down and you passed that exam. Obviously, going into that, you had to have that base level of knowledge in order to go past that exam. So having the exam doesn't mean that you don't have the knowledge, right? you should look at each, I mean, act as if you're hiring someone, right? Get a project background, dig into the work they've done in the past, check references, right? All those kinds of things. But if you're devoted to only hiring certified technical architects, your window of opportunity is going to be very, very narrow.
Yeah. You know, that's a good cert to get, because it can't be faked, I don't think, easily. People try and fail. It's very hard. It's not just the money of it, it's the time, the expense, the format of it. You know, if you're going to look for any certs because you have a complex project, you know, I would just focus on that one thing, because you know it's very hard. You know, all of the other certs, not faked, but you can go on Trailhead, you can learn the stuff, not have the experience, get those certs. But if you have this large complex engagement, then on your shopping list probably is a certified CTA. Salesforce can obviously provide those as well, but at least you know that that's hard, and yeah, they probably do have the experience. I don't think many people can kind of get through that easily.
Right. It's hard because of the application of it, right? I think, you know, they actually have a board where you need to present, and you need to be able to present like you would, you know, a stakeholder team. And I think that that's the better, you know, the most complex part about it. But I would also say that people who take certifications are, it's generally a great idea to do, right? But also you have to apply that knowledge. Like, it's very easy to use, you know, best judgment or reasoning, or, you know, be able to, when you're taking certification, be able to determine the best possible choice based upon nomenclature and words that you study and things like that. But application is so important, just as it is for the experience. So yes, you can get a certification, and that means that you understand it. But the application of that certification is very different depending on your customer business needs. And quite frankly, there will be questions about sharing rules on the test, and you'll pass, you know, that module on sharing rules. But however, complex sharing rules, or manual sharing rules, or the limitations of sharing rules, or the limitations because you have big data problems, like those right now, the ones that I've taken, are not, you know, certifiable. And so many times, again and again, many customers are in the complex scenarios because businesses are innovating and the platform is trying to keep up with everything. But there's no way that you can ever test for everything. And I think that the things that are tested for do a good job about making sure that that person is well-rounded. But there's always going to be edge cases, and, you know, you need some experience as well to be able to make sure that you can confidently have the confidence in your customer to win.
Awesome.
Saying that is balance. You know, it's not just one thing. You know, look at Trailhead, look at their certs, look at their experience. You know, don't just focus on, have they got the right certs? Okay, they must be good. Just look across the board at the whole thing and ask yourself, is there someone out there that trusts them? Is there multiple people out there that trust this person? You know, use your network to kind of check them out. And I think that's the ultimate way of hiring the right people.
Perfect. So we'll leave our audience with one last thing. There's a lot of people watching this that are probably somewhere on their journey to becoming an architect potentially. Maybe they're just getting started in the Salesforce ecosystem. Maybe they have 10 plus years of experience like you gentlemen. What's kind of within, you know, kind of 10 to 20 seconds, the one kind of piece of advice that you would give to anyone that's on that journey?
Find someone you want to be like. Still carry your uniqueness, but Matt caught on this today, and I think it's definitely true for, you know, where we started our architect careers, is find a mentor. Mentors are great. The Salesforce Ohana is amazing, but really watch how someone works a crowd, works a meeting, and just pick up these, you know, little items. I was joking with these guys yesterday. I noticed a significant change in my vernacular when speaking to customers versus when I had my first day of my consulting job, you know, in 2011. Like the difference is massive, and, you know, that's, you know, a great win and a great skill to have. But it wouldn't have been possible without some really great people, and I think we all know some really great technical architects in this college have been a part of our lives. And, you know, those soft skills can't change. It's about, you know, having an experience on a project and, being under someone who is is awesome to just watch and learn from. Wasn't 20 seconds, but
no, that's okay.
go for it.
I mean, just go off learning there. I mean, I add to that, own your learning, right? There's lots of information out there and lots of ways of learning, but ultimately it sits with you, right? You've got to own your learning. So, if you are doing tons of trailer badges, watching loads of blogs, doing all of those things, ask yourself, am I just doing them or am I actually learning them? Am I taking those skills and actually putting them into practice? So, own your learning.
Yeah. Do delivery. Like go work on projects, go deliver solutions for customers, get on a variety of projects to the degree that you're able to, right? And do so alongside someone who you can look up to as a mentor. Right? That's the way to get the experience, is to do it and do as much delivery as you can.
And learn
Love it. Find a mentor, own your learning, do delivery. Very good. Well, thank you guys very much. You did an awesome job. Joshua, Matthew, Mike, thanks for your time. Appreciate your insights, and we'll see you in the community.